Today, her husband told the court she'd flaunted her affair with banker Graham Ryan. During a furious row, he grabbed her neck and she collapsed. Mr. Hogg says he lied to police about his wife's whereabouts as he was frightened for his children if he was jailed. The trial continues. The recent slide of the pound against the dollar was partly the government's fault, according to a report by MPs. It points to a confusion between Mrs. Thatcher's statement that she wanted the pound to rise and the Chancellor's view that there wasn't any target for sterling. The All-Party Treasury Committee, chaired by the Conservative MP Terence Higgins, concludes that this ambiguity has exacerbated the situation. Tonight, the pound closed 1.5 cents up at $1.07. Uncertainties about the US budget deficit had prompted a late run against the dollar. The Conservative backbencher Ivan Lawrence has delivered the longest Commons speech this century, almost 4.5 hours in all. He was arguing against government plans to add fluoride to the water supply. He's also a barrister and only stopped speaking because he was due in court at the Old Bailey. Cecil Parkinson, the former Tory party chairman, has had his injunction against Private Eye upheld by the High Court. The injunction halts distribution of this week's issue and bans reproduction of an article allegedly libelling Mr. Parkinson and his secretary. Lord Gowrie, the Arts Minister, told the Lords about a bonus offer for companies which sponsor arts projects. The government will match every pound they offer above £1,000. But Lord Gowrie warned overall art spending could not increase.
It really would be an extraordinary signal to other areas of the public sector if the arts were to receive a substantial and a unique uprating. It would be seen, and in my judgment rightly, as the professional middle classes promoting an area of the welfare state especially attractive to themselves while squeezing other services.
The miners' strike is dragging on to an increasingly bitter end. Only 10,000 men are still out, according to the Coal Board. Many of the flying pickets from Kent, who've been trying to stem the flow of miners into South Wales and Yorkshire pits, had to stand aside today. In all, the Coal Board says 176,000 miners are working normally, over 94% of the workforce. The numbers were swelled by Scottish miners, whose delegates voted in Edinburgh to go back to work. The decision reversed Monday's vote to stay out until sacked men were reinstated, and seemed to some betrayal.
Delegates leaving the recall conference in Edinburgh, which overturned Monday's decision to continue the strike in Scotland, were jostled and abused by about 100 miners who were accusing them of a sellout. But the toughest treatment was reserved for Scottish President Mick Mackay, whose own son Michael is among the 180 men sacked by the Coal Board north of the border during the strike. Angry miners chanted their displeasure at the 10-5 vote in favour of a return to work. Mr. Mackay Sr. needed protection from two of the burliest delegates to get away from the meeting hall. Despite the big majority to end the strike tomorrow, Mr. Mackay, safe in the haven of the NUM's own offices, said the fight to reinstate sacked men would go on. And he wasn't surprised at his men's angry reaction.
No, of course I'm not surprised. I'd have been surprised if I'd have come out and met a tranquil audience. After all, these lads have been struggling for a year. They're bitter, they're angry, as I am bitter and angry at the victimisation in the course of fighting for their jobs. Some of them being penalised in the courts, and now they're being penalised by the board. They're bound to be angry.
The men at Francis Colliery and Fife didn't wait for the delegates' vote. They marched back to work this morning, and their reaction on spying some of the 300 men who've been going through the picket lines at Francis for several days suggests that the bitterness is far from over.
Of Yorkshire's 58 pits, the Coal Board said all but 2 were back at work. After last night's decision by the union that the Kent flying pickets were unofficial, they withdrew, though reluctantly.
At Prince of Wales Colliery, Kent miners mounted an unofficial blockade demanding the reinstatement of sacked miners. The Yorkshire men, overalls and snap at hand, hesitated until branch officials called the Kent miners out of earshot to discuss the impasse. The huddle was brief. The Yorkshiremen wanted through. One picket broke away in disgust. The union had persuaded the pickets to step aside. The Kent man was visibly angry at what he saw as a betrayal. At Silverwood, men, long-labelled scabs, braved the silent hostility of NUM loyalists.
I don't think anybody should work next to a man who's not stuck it out and stuck by his union.
Will you be able to work with people who've broke the strike?
I'm working with one today, and he better do some blinding work and all.
Neglected pit-top gardens were dug and tidied. No miner will produce coal underground for weeks. Others repaired the colliery signboards to fill in shift time. Most just hung around, caught in the vacuum of an industry's regeneration.
In South Wales, fewer men had broken ranks during the strike than anywhere else. Since the return, they've been vastly outnumbered and in some cases treated with sharp resentment.
There have been many riots at the smokeless fuel plant near Aberdare over the last 3 months. But even though the strike is over, things are no different for Paul Watson, the one man who broke the strike there. Mr. Watson, driven by his wife, have had to run a gauntlet of missiles and abuse at the works entrance, which they have described as cowardly intimidation.
It was absolutely hell when I went in. There was women on the gates, and as soon as I got into the car park, there's about 30 or 40 of them come running at the car, they throwed eggs and everything at the car as we were coming in. And when I got out of the car, they started shouting abuse and started kicking the car in. You know, as long as the work is there for me in the plant, I shall continue to go to the plant. And what happened yesterday, I think, was absolutely disgusting, I thought. That even the night shift were really kicking my car in as I was...
Demonstrators supporting the miners attacked the TUC General Secretary Norman Willis during a rally in London. The rally was being held to protest about the government's rate capping plans, and it attracted a large turnout of people opposed to Mrs. Thatcher's policies for local government. But behind the carnival atmosphere was a serious purpose. Tomorrow, 16 local authorities will decide whether to defy the law by not setting a rate. At the march were representatives of local council services and the politicians who'll be making the rates decision. Service, the washing machine manufacturer, has called in the receiver, and up to 2,000 may lose their jobs. Service is based in the Midlands and is trying to mount a rescue operation. And 1,000 people are to lose their jobs at the Shell refinery near Ellesmere Port. Almost a third of the workforce will go over the next 2 years. Shell blame fierce competition for the cuts. The chief minister of a British dependency in the Caribbean is in a Florida jail tonight, charged with being involved in a vast racket to smuggle drugs into the United States. Norman Saunders, chief minister of the Turks and Caicos Islands, was arrested in Miami with 3 other men. American drug enforcement agents caught them in a classic sting operation, set up, it said, with help from Scotland Yard. This report from Brian Barron.
Okay, come on out. Come on.
Handcuffed and manacled together with 2 alleged accomplices, the Caribbean ministers were briefly seen today, just hours before their court appearance. Chief Minister Norman Saunders has lodged a formal complaint about ill treatment. As a result, a British consular official who happened to be in Miami is seeing him. But federal authorities here say the politicians are being treated just like other suspects routinely picked up. Mr. Saunders and his finance minister spent the night in the cells of this federal courthouse. Because of the gravity of the charges against them, bail has been set at a tremendously high level. In Mr. Saunders' case, £1.5 million. Miami authorities say the arrests were the result of an elaborate undercover operation.
The purpose, as I said, was to provide protection for the movement of narcotics and for the staging of the movement of narcotics through the Turks and Caicos Islands into the United States. A number of cash payments were made directly to the Chief Minister, Norman Saunders. One payment, approximately $30,000, was made.
With the cooperation of Chief Minister Saunders, the Americans recently installed radar on the main airfield to try to track drug smugglers. But federal sources allege Mr. Saunders knew that planes carrying cocaine were still staging through the islands. The Drug Enforcement Agency here is emphasising the undercover operation was carried out with the full knowledge and help of the British government, presumably through the island's governor. And Scotland Yard were apparently involved. Officials say none of the arrested men has any diplomatic immunity because they were on a private visit to Miami. The only one to speak out so far is Commerce Minister Stafford Missick.
I don't regard myself as being arrested. I haven't done anything.
9 months ago, Chief Minister Saunders received by President Reagan at the White House. Now he faces up to 30 years in jail if convicted.
The survey ship HMS Endurance is on its way to rescue the leader of a British Joint Services expedition who's lying injured in Antarctica. Lieutenant Commander Clive Waghorn was one of a party of 4 climbing mountains on Brabant Island when he fell into a crevasse and broke his leg. Now a race is on to reach him before the weather worsens. This report from Michael Vesti.
Lieutenant Commander Clive Waghorn is the Royal Navy's top canoeist and a skilled mountaineer. But on Monday, while leading a party of 3 other servicemen, he fell into a crevasse and broke his leg. This is the 3rd joint services expedition to the largely unexplored Brabant Island, and before they went, the teams learned how to cope with just this sort of accident by practicing in the cairngorms. While Lieutenant Commander Waghorn's radio operator pitched a tent and stayed with him to administer morphine, his other 2 colleagues returned to base camp for help, 3 days away. After receiving the distress signal, the Royal Navy's ice patrol ship, HMS Endurance, left the Falkland Islands and headed south towards Brabant Island, but it won't arrive until Friday. Offers of help have come from the Americans and Chileans in their sectors, and from the British Antarctic Survey, but aircraft may not be able to land on the glacier where the injured man is. And time is important. Blizzards have prevented aircraft reaching him, and Lieutenant Commander Waghorn might run out of drugs and food, though it's hoped that medical supplies will be dropped tomorrow.
Several England cricketers have arrived home after their highly successful tour of India and much briefer and pretty disastrous visit to Australia. Mark Austin reports.
Hi, all right. Not all the England players returned this morning. Several, including the captain David Gowrie, stayed on in Australia for a holiday. The historic Test victories in India were slightly overshadowed by the one-day defeats in Australia. But for Vice-Captain Mike Gatting, the tour was a personal triumph. He scored his maiden Test century and averaged more than 95 in the Test series. Back in Australia, the West Indies, the hot favourites for the much-vaunted World Championship of Cricket, have been knocked out by Pakistan. The West Indies were all out for 159, Mudassar taking 5 wickets. Pakistan knocked off the total with ease, winning by 7 wickets, and now play India in Sunday's final. Not the match that the tournament sponsors either expected or wanted.
And there is the winning run. Pakistan are into the final.
In Tokyo, Britain's ice dance champions Karen Barber and Nikki Slater are still lying in 6th position in the World Championships after today's original set pattern dances. With only the free dance section to go on Friday, they now seem out of the hunt for the medals, which are likely to be shared by their Soviet and West German rivals. Britain's other pair in the competition, Sharon Jones and Paul Ascombe, are in 16th place.
Britain's Tyrrell Grand Prix team have settled their legal battle with the International Motorsport Federation over alleged rule infringements. The team, disqualified from 1984's World Championship, will now compete again this year. Tonight's Cup Soccer. In the second leg of the Milk Cup semi-final, Norwich 2, Ipswich 0. Norwich meet Sunderland in the final. The FA Cup fifth round replays, West Ham 5, Wimbledon 1. And a later score, Watford 2, Luton 1. In the first leg of the European Cup quarter-finals, Austria Vienna 1, Liverpool 1. In the European Cup Winners' Cup, Everton 3, Fortuna Sittard Holland 0. And in the UEFA Cup, Tottenham 0, Real Madrid 1. That's the latest score. Manchester United have been at home to Videoton of Hungary. Paul Newman reports.
United forced 2 corners inside 5 minutes. First, Graham Hogg headed straight at the keeper. Then Paul McGrath struck a firm volley well over the bar. The handling by the Videoton goalkeeper looked uncertain as he twice dropped the ball under pressure. United's most dangerous forward, Mark Hughes, did find the net, but he was ruled offside. On the half-hour, Norman Whiteside came within inches of giving United the lead. United's frustrations were underlined when Frank Stapleton missed from just 6 yards out. But the same player made amends shortly after half-time.
And now the main news points again. Lord Bridges' report has cleared governments back to 1970 of illegal phone tapping. Britain wants compensation from Libya for the murder of WPC Yvonne Fletcher. Scottish miners have voted to join the return to work. Finally, do smokers get up your nose? If so, you'll sympathise with an American anti-smoking campaigner taking part in a televised debate with a professor who lit up and polluted the polite, dignified atmosphere of the studio.
Now, unfortunately, my opponent is sitting here smoking. The smoke is going in my face. He's doing it in violation of D.C. fire laws, so I'm putting it out because it is a violation of D.C. fire laws. No violence.
Hold on, gentlemen. Gentlemen.
That was self-defense, Doctor. That was self-defense, Doctor. No violence.
Take a glass of water home with you on the bus tonight. That's it for now. Newsnight is at 10:30 on BBC Two. From me, good night.
There were no arguments about the weather anyway. A razor-sharp edge of cloud that divided Britain's weather neatly into two today as fronts pushed up against quite a persistent ridge of high pressure between a dull west and a very sunny east. But we're going to do the British thing about it, no fighting. We're going to all change places tomorrow and give a brighter day in the north and west and cloudy conditions for a change in the southeast. This front will come across the country and weaken as it does so. A temporary break coming into the northwest of Britain before this next system brings more rain into northwest Britain for Friday and Saturday, but staying mainly dry, I think, through Friday and Saturday in the southeast. Watch the front coming eastward across the country and weakening as it does so, and brighter weather, mainly dry weather, getting into western Britain. But this next system coming very close towards northwest Britain by the end of tomorrow. Let's have a look at our old familiar symbols now, put a bit of weather on that. That's the position now. Just a very few patches of fog in the southeast of England. A lot of cloud over the country, rain or drizzle in places, most of it quite light. By dawn, though, most of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and northern Wales too will have become dry, with a few patches of fog, perhaps even a few patches of ice on the roads as well. Quite a wide range of temperatures tonight, down that cloudy middle strip, 6 Celsius, 43 Fahrenheit, but near freezing, 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit in East Anglia, and perhaps, as I mentioned, just a touch of frost over Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland. And this is what I expect we're going to wake up to tomorrow, that frontal band pushing ever more steadily and weakening as it does so in towards the southeast of England, but a lot of dry, bright weather in the north by afternoon. Some rain approaching northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland, but most of Britain dry. The southeast, rather cloudy, just a little bit of light rain or drizzle in places. Another mild day, 8 or 9 Celsius, 46 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Not just as mild as today, but another very pleasant day for most of us. And that's it. I wish you all a very good night indeed.
Did you know you don't have to pay your TV license all at once? For instance, if you visit your local post office regularly, you can spread your payments over 10 months and take the worry out of future bills by using the cash installment plan. Just one of the easy ways to pay your TV license.
Radio Times heralds the arrival of a new BBC drama series. In a colour feature, Peter Barkworth talks about his career and his new role in Late Starter beginning next Friday on BBC One. On the day of his retirement, Professor Brett's private and financial affairs collapse when his wife inexplicably goes missing.
I don't understand it, Penny. She's never done anything like that. Never.
Professor, it's hard to know what to advise. But I cannot, at the moment, advance you any more money.
What's the matter, Professor?
A great deal, Sylvia.
Brett's change of circumstances puts him out on the streets. And running scared through the corridors of fear is Frank Finlay, the star of In the Secret State, this Sunday on BBC Two. As the ex-head of a secret government department, his suspicions are aroused by a colleague's suicide.
What happened isn't your fault, Mrs. Lister.
In a way, I know that. He changed so completely. He'd be totally depressed.
The Lister report must be handled with the greatest of tact. This department does not exist. Should not care to read in my morning paper that it does.
A poisonous web of manipulation and shady dealing puts more lives in danger and sets Frank Finlay as the watcher in the shadows on the cover of the new Radio Times.
International boxing and the World Figure Skating Championships from Tokyo are featured later this evening in Sports Night at 10:20. This is BBC One. And now the first in a new series of QED. It's a programme that takes a scientific and sometimes frank look at the delicate subject of boy meets girl, and so some of the film may not be to everyone's taste.